Thank you, Pastor. Well, for those of you who are new, who don't know me, my name is Dana Gazelschen. I lived in Kentucky for almost 10 years before I married my husband, Caleb. That's him behind the camera there. And we recently relocated here. I had moved to North Dakota when we got married. Recently relocated here, February, I think was when we moved back here. And we're in the process of establishing our ministry in Casey County, in the town of Liberty. We've recently purchased a small farm there, and we're in the process of building a house and a ministry building. I don't recommend doing those two things together, but that's the way the Lord has opened the doors for us, and He's given us grace to do it. What we've been talking about is life, as you see, life the old-fashioned way. This is kind of a new look at the basic laws of health. A lot of people call this the New Start program. And that's basically what this is, but I'm looking at it from a little bit different angle. I like the study of epigenetics, and I'll introduce that tonight. I'll tell you what that is, what it's all about. I have to apologize because, as you may have seen whenever you first came in, for some reason my computer will put presenter screen up here and not here where I need it. So I haven't had a chance to review so much, so if I stumble a little bit, you'll have to bear with me. So what we're talking about tonight is, as I mentioned, the 8 laws of health, and tonight we want to introduce the subject of sunshine. How can sunshine be a benefit to us? It's a fact, it's a known fact, that there's nothing living on this earth or under the ocean that in one way or another is not influenced by the effect of the sun. Nothing can live without the effect of the sun. I am a creationist, and I believe in the beginning God created. And I believe that what it says here, He saw that it was good when He made the sun. In fact, He thought it was so good that He put Adam and Eve where?
In a garden.
In a garden. What do you get in the garden? Lots of fresh air, sunlight, exercise, all these things. Epigenetics and the laws of good health is what we are focusing on as we talk about these laws of health. Epigenetics basically is the on and off switch on our genes to turn disease on or off. In our first presentation, we talked about nutrition. I introduced Doctors Campbell and what's the other one? I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, the 2 doctors that did a lot of the nutritional studies. Welcome. Anyway, they studied epigenetics in the light of nutrition, and they found out by changing a person's diet, they could either turn off or on cancer genes, heart disease genes, and so forth. So this epigenetics study is very important. We can actually turn off the switches for disease and turn on the switch for health. How can sunlight affect my epigenetics? How can sunlight turn off the switches for disease and turn on the switches for health? Can it affect my genes? Yes, it can. I was fascinated when I studied this, because even now, as I look forward in the other presentations in this series, I don't have them prepared yet, and so I'm moving forward in faith, believing that there's going to be an epigenetic effect in every one of these laws of health, and so far I've not been disappointed. I'm fascinated as I study this. But sunshine causes wrinkles and skin cancer and stuff like that, so nobody wants to get out in the sun, or we lather up with sunblock, right? Well, some people actually don't do that, but I want to investigate this tonight because there are some key factors that influence this, and I want you to understand that there is a proper sunlight exposure and there's an improper sunlight exposure. Now, this guy did not get his wrinkles from sunshine, I guarantee you. Okay, skin that has been repeatedly exposed to the sun looks older than skin that hasn't, because the skin's stem cells have had to divide more often to repair damage. Now, here's where we're going to get a little bit technical, so bear with me. But this is fascinating. Telomeres are responsible for that. You know that. You remember that, right? Everybody knows telomeres are responsible for wrinkles, right?
What's a telomere?
What's a telomere? Okay. Telomeres actually are responsible for the sagging skin and the wrinkles. We talked about telomeres in the last 2 studies. Telomeres are the little, our chromosomes have a little, you know, they're made up of DNA. And at the end of the chromosomes is a little cap, kind of like the end on your shoestring, that keeps the chromosome from becoming unraveled. So that every time the chromosomes divide, they lose a little bit of genetic material. This telomere, this is it right here on the ends. You see here? Those are the telomeres. Now those telomeres are they're repetition of genetic material, so that every time the chromosome divides, when that little bit of genetic material is lost, that's kind of a buffer that keeps your chromosome young and healthy and able to divide through time. We know that when the telomeres begin to shorten, once they shorten out so much, the cells can actually, the chromosomes can actually even short out. But the telomeres shorten and the chromosome can no longer divide. But there are things that you and I can do to lengthen those telomeres. Now, we're going to introduce something different tonight. Telomerase. Anytime you see ASE on the end of a word like this, what are we talking about? Who knows? Anybody guess? That's an enzyme. Telomerase is an enzyme. Now, part of the sun's protective power is that its ultraviolet rays, you can read it here, turn on several processes in the body to lengthen those telomeres. There it is. There's the epigenetics. Isn't that amazing? The sunshine. Sunshine causes the body to release something called nitric oxide. Now, it's not the nitrous oxide that the dentist gives you. That's the laughing gas, they call it. It's nitric oxide. By the way, we'll talk about, let me not get ahead of myself. Nitric oxide activates this telomerase, and that lengthens the telomeres. That's how that works. Okay, I just think that's fascinating. So if you have a friend or a loved one who has high blood pressure, getting them out of the sun causes this nitric oxide to be released, and that lowers the blood pressure. Not only that, I tease my husband that he has hose pipes for veins. I could start an IV across the room with a dart gun on him. When he gets out in the sunshine, his blood vessels really dilate. What happens when your blood vessels dilate to the blood pressure?
It goes down.
It goes down. Okay, so there's a dual effect to lower the blood pressure with sunlight. Now, Elizabeth Blackburn was the woman who discovered telomerase, and this telomerase rebuilds those telomeres, those end caps of genetic material, so that our cells, our genes, stay younger. Sunlight encourages your skin to make melanin. That's the pigment in our skin. Some people have a little bit more, some people have a little bit less. You have a little more than I do. You're a darker complexion than I am. Now, that melanin is a natural sunscreen. Did you know that? That's actually a natural sunscreen. There's a relationship between how much melanin you have in your skin and the length of your telomeres. And so, now, yes?
So my redheaded sister that gets sunburned so bad, she may not have as long as telomeres.
That's true. But there's something she can do about that. Now, and we'll talk about it when we get further on, but I'll just go ahead and answer that since he brought it up. Fair-skinned people do tend to burn more easily, but a gradual exposure to the sun, and it may only take 5 minutes until the skin turns pink, and then cover either with sleeves or a wide brim hat or get out of the sun. Now, I don't want to get too much into that because we're going to talk more about this as we get on into the talk. But a gradual darkening and building up of the melanin in the skin will produce a natural sunscreen in the body. When melanin becomes concentrated in one area, it darkens the skin, as we just talked about, and it keeps the cells younger by providing that natural sunscreen, so we don't get the wrinkles, we don't get the skin cancer. Black people and people that have darker skin, you would need probably 3 to 6 times as much sun exposure to get the same effect with the melanin as I do. You might need 2 times as much. Somebody like your sister, she's going to get out there, she doesn't need that, you know. Okay. So, now we're not talking about, and this is answering his inquiry, we're not talking about burning the skin. How many of you have that? That's painful, isn't it? Yeah, that's very painful. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about a peak. With some people, with most people, the average time that it takes for this is 10 to 20 minutes, somewhere in that time frame. And you can gradually roll from there. Now, let's talk about sunlight and melatonin just a little bit. Melatonin is, when sunlight enters through the eye, it communicates with, who's heard of the pineal gland? Deep in the brain. It's sometimes called our third eye. When sunlight enters through the eye, it stimulates that pineal gland to produce melatonin. Now, melatonin is responsible for our body's sleep-wake cycle, our circadian rhythm. If you observe sunrise in the morning, now I'm an advocate to early to rise, early to bed, you know. So if you observe sunrise and then you observe sunset in the evening, that gives a clear signal to the pineal gland, to the brain, to produce melatonin at the proper rate, and it helps to regulate your sleep-wake cycle, your body's circadian rhythm. What about serotonin? Serotonin helps to regulate the mood. People that don't have adequate sunlight tend to suffer from more depression. And even healthy people during the winter time tend to suffer from more depression because we're not getting as much sunlight. Serotonin levels rise in the brain on days with a lot of sunlight, and bright light may boost your mood by activating neurons in your brain that contain serotonin, and that increases the level in the brain. By the way, let me go back to melatonin just briefly. Blue light has a very harmful effect on the eye, especially late in the evening. If I sit on my computer screen and the primary light in this is a blue light, if I sit and look at my computer screen late in the evening, what happens to me?
Hard sleep.
I cannot go to sleep. I'm wide awake. And so it's the orange light of the sun. And I read a study one time that was fascinating to me because they said orange light helps to produce that melatonin in the brain. They even had somebody to wear orange tinted lenses, and that helped. But have you ever looked at a fireplace or a campfire and it's that orange light? What happens to you? You get really mellow and sleepy. It has this same effect on the brain. More beneficial effects of the sunlight. You can use it to treat skin diseases, and I've done this many times, such as psoriasis, vitiligo, atopic dermatitis, and it promotes skin healing, wound healing through its antimicrobial effects. One time when I was still teaching at UG Ponds, Dr. Agatha and I did a breast implant removal on a lady, and I took her home with me to recover her after the surgery. And one of her treatments was sunlight exposure, and I had never, hands down, never seen a wound heal as fast as that lady did. We just took her out in a shielded area and just exposed her chest, and it was incredible how quickly she healed. Treating neonatal jaundice, when I used to work in newborn nursery, we put the babies under the billy lights. When they would go home, often we would just tell the mother, undress the baby, put them in a sunny window, even outside on the porch, whatever, just in a safe place, and it would help to bring those bilirubin levels down. Another thing you can do for that, by the way, this is free information, is charcoal slurry water. That will help to bring it down. You just put it in a bottle. Anyway, I'll move on here. I don't want to delay too long. Tuberculosis. Look at this. One study was able to show an astonishing 100% resolution rate of patients being treated with 10,000 milligrams of vitamin D. 100% success rate. That's amazing. And we can get 80 to 100% of our vitamin D requirements from the sun. We don't necessarily have to take supplementation. Now there are some exceptions to that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Okay.
Black folk need twice as much as white folk.
What's that?
It said that black folk need twice as much sunlight as white folk.
That's right, and it's because of the skin pigmentation. And black people have a tendency to tuberculosis more susceptible. Okay, here's the biggie, vitamin D, sunlight and vitamin D. This is where a lot of the research is focused these days. Since the invention of sunscreens, skin cancers, particularly melanoma, has skyrocketed. And also other deadly diseases, depression, bone loss, heart disease, and a slew of other diseases. A study by Georgia Health Science University found adults taking 2,000 international units, and you can get that from the sun. You don't necessarily have to take supplementation. Increase their telomere production by 19%. And so there's something to this. They also did a study on twins, and this was interesting to me because it shows that our lifestyle choices are what affects the length of our telomeres. Okay, it's your vitamin D levels, not our genetics, that affect this. Researchers reported those with the highest level of vitamin D among twins. They compared twins that maybe had different lifestyles. The highest levels of vitamin D had telomeres that were 5 years younger than their twin. And so it's not genetics. These people were twins. Their genes were the same. It was the choices that they made, the lifestyle choices. And this talks about it. What kind of choices is this lady making? She's eating fast food. She's cramming it down while she's driving. She's sitting behind glass in a vehicle. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. So she's making some very poor lifestyle choices there. I already talked about this, that we can get 80 to 100% of our vitamin D from the sunlight. That's if we get adequate UVB radiation and time in the sun. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Signs of vitamin diseases that come as a result of vitamin D deficiency. Who would think diabetes? Vitamin D deficiency. Diabetes is number one on the list. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer, osteomalacia, which is bone pain, multiple sclerosis, depression, candida, weak bones and teeth, hormonal imbalances. Did you know the sunlight can help to regulate your hormones? It's amazing. Signs of deficiency. Let me back up. Raise your hand if you think you're deficient in vitamin D. One honest person. The fact is, probably 90% of you in here are deficient in vitamin D. Chronic pain, fractures, gut disorders such as constipation or diarrhea, excessive sweating, depression, weakness, weight gain, headaches, restless sleep. Now how many of you are vitamin D deficient? A few more honest people. Okay, this is a little bit technical, but this is kind of how this process works. When the sunlight hits the skin, it stimulates the liver. It creates pre-vitamin D3. This is not an active form of vitamin D3. It has to go through some processes in the liver and in the kidneys, and then it's activated vitamin D3. And this is important because kidney failure patients, almost hands down, are always vitamin D deficient because the kidney cannot activate the vitamin D. Okay, calcium. Did you know that almost every other mineral in your body piggybacks on vitamin D3 to get into the cell? You can change your cell health by getting out in the sunshine on a daily basis. Okay, here's where we're going to talk about UVB just a little bit. UVB and UVA. UVB radiation, there's two, well there's more than two, there's basically I think 3 types of ultraviolet rays from the sun. UVB radiation, our skin requires this UVB to produce vitamin D. Glass blocks UVB. Now, think about this. Let's paint a scenario for the average American, okay? We leave the house, we go to the garage, we get in the car, we leave the car, we park as close as we can to Walmart because nobody wants to be in the sun that long. We run in Walmart, get what we need, we go back to the car, we get in the car, we run to work, we sit in the building all day, then we get out of the car in the evening, we run to the car, we go home, we park in the garage, and we go in the house. Do you see the problem? How much sunlight are we actually getting? We're behind glass all the time. And the thing about it, and let me not get ahead of myself, I'll talk about that in just a minute. I'll come back to what my and was. It's known that people who work indoors have an increased risk of melanoma. You would think that the farmer out on his tractor is the one with the greater risk. That's not true. Indoor workers have a greater risk of melanoma than those who work inside. In fact, and this is statistics from Dr. McCullough, this was interesting. 1 million people die per year from vitamin D3 deficiency. And over 1 billion people are known to be deficient in vitamin D largely because of lack of sunlight. Okay, UVA and UVB, there's two types, there's more than two types, as I said, there's UVC as well. UVA does not produce vitamin D. It's here almost year-round, if not year-round. It's there even on cloudy days, and glass does not stop it. So if you're sitting in your car for hours at a time, driving on a long trip, you're still getting the UVA rays. That does not produce vitamin D3. So don't think because you're sitting in the sunshine in your car, you're getting your vitamin D3. It doesn't happen that way. UVB does produce vitamin D. Look at this. Yes?
UVA helps to resolve the bilirubin issue? You said that they put the baby up
Under the belly light.
with the...
And you know, I
In a
used to
window.
investigate that, if it's UVA or UVB. I know tanning beds are UVA.
Oh, okay.
They are, tanning beds are UVA, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But I'm not sure if the bilirubin
Okay,
are A
sorry,
or B.
didn't mean to embarrass you.
No, I'm not embarrassed at all. No, I can make it
No, okay.
I'm studying. I am. The more I study this stuff, the stupider I get, I'll tell you. Sunscreen blocks UVB, but allows UVA. And so, when we lather up with the sunscreens, we're blocking our body's ability to manufacture vitamin D3. So sunscreens are contributing to vitamin D3 deficiency. Wrap your mind around that one. Isn't that interesting? UVB rays do cause sunburn, and they can contribute to skin cancers, but they're only prevalent during the hottest part of the day, like from 11 to 2, and they're not as strong like in the winter months. It's mostly during like the latter part of spring, summer, and the early part of fall. Okay? And if you have snow, it increases the effect of the UVB. UVA rays, as I mentioned, are present throughout the year, even if it's cloudy, and so you need protection year-round. These are also the type of rays, as I mentioned, that are found in tanning booths. We do not recommend use them. In fact, I think it was when I lived here before, it was like in the mid-2000s or so, there was a young girl not too far from here that actually died. She was trying to prepare for the prom, and she went from, they have a limit on it for tanning beds, and she went from place to place, laid in a tanning bed, and she died. She died. It is clear that vitamin D deficiency may be the most common denominator in the common diseases of today. And in fact, if we would learn to deal with vitamin D deficiency, even the medicine as we know it would be put out of business. That's a bold statement. You know, if we really look at these laws of health, which were all present in the beginning, in the Garden of Eden, they're all there. If you look in the first couple chapters of Genesis, you'll see it. It's plain as day. God is so smart. And these principles that He's given us are life-giving. How many of you have been not feeling well and you go lay out in the sun and it helps you feel better? It works, doesn't it? And there's some science behind it. And that's what we're finding out. There's some science behind it. Okay, so how much sun do we need? Now this guy right here, Dr. Michael Hollick, is an expert. And I watched some of his stuff, and it was mind-boggling. But I didn't quote too much of his stuff because we are at swords points on origins. So I didn't quote too much of him. But one thing that I did gather is that people who live in the more northern latitudes don't get adequate vitamin D. Now guess what? I want to show you something. Except during the summer months, the skin makes little, if any, vitamin D from the sun at latitudes above 37 degrees north in the United States. And I'm going to show you a map on the next page. People who live in these areas are at relatively greater risk for vitamin D deficiency. Now, where does Kentucky lie?
Probably right on the line.
36.
Guesses?
36.
We are north of the
Oh,
37
bummer.
degree. Y'all in trouble. Y'all are
Not very far
vitamin D
north.
deficient. Yeah, no, we're
Not
not
as bad
too
as that
far
North
north.
Dakota stuff.
But it's, yeah, North Dakota, that's how, we took vitamin D through and left in North Dakota. So, and in fact, my husband and I both had our levels tested, it was right before, well, it was about a year and a half before we went down here. We're still in North Dakota, we were both deficient. And so we started, he was, I think you were moderately deficient and I was severely deficient. And so my little southern body was in protest. So anyway, so yes, we are north of that 37-degree latitude. So you need to think about this. Okay? You need to think about this. Now, vitamin D is fat soluble, so your body can store it up. Kind of like canning our vegetables for the winter. We can store up some vitamin D, but typically by the end of winter, that's all gone. And so you need to be thinking about it. If you're not a gardener and active out of doors during the summer, even here in Kentucky, you need to think about having your vitamin D levels tested, because that achy bone that you may have could be because you don't have enough vitamin D3. Okay? And so it's important. It's something we all need to think about. Natural helpers, an antioxidant-rich diet, that helps to not burn and not have the effect of skin cancers and stuff like that, to have those natural antioxidants. Omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin E, no animal fats in the diet, adequate exercise and water consumption. We talked about water last time I was here. Hats, vibrant hats, and sleeves. By the way, I hope you don't mind. My husband was doing landscaping before we moved to Casey County, where we are now, and he was out in the sun all day long, and it was a kind of a hot summer this year. And he had these suspenders that were shaped like a Y. They came in the back and then they went down to the center. And I just cracked up one day. I had never noticed this. He took off his shirt and he walked away from me, and he had a Y suntan. It was white. Where they,
Tanning through the shirt.
yeah, he was
Right
tanning
through
through
the
his
shirt,
shirt. So he was, you still get some, even with the sleeves. You know, so you do still get some. Okay. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And just like if we don't get our exposure to the sunlight, if we don't have adequate exposure to the light of the world, we're prone to all kinds of spiritual diseases. And so, the Creator created the sunlight. And He is the light that gives true light. And so I just want to encourage you to look into His laws of health. He created us. He knows what makes our bodies work the best. And He knows what we need. And so if there's no questions, then I'm going to turn it over to whoever's next, if it's Janita or okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.